Hello and welcome to another episode of D1 Daily. Burkie and Roons here. Burkie, we got a lot to get to.
That's an early pause,
yeah.
Roons. Early pause. You okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm not okay. We're swirling.
Okay.
We got a lot. We've got a lot. I'm super fired up for today.
Let's breathe. Let's breathe. Maybe step out of the box. Do you need a 20?
I'm sped up, but not in an anxious way. I'm sped up. I'm too excited.
Okay.
So you're right. It's good coaching instincts by you. You notice that the player is too amped up. Yeah, I've had too many energy drinks.
You need to go with Andrew Fisher. Take your timeouts. Take your time.
That's right. That's right.
I wonder if Andrew Fisher
in his timeouts.
And we can't even get through the intro without digressing, but I wonder if Andrew Fisher, Peyton Manning had a great quote one time. He said, the timeouts in football actually aren't the teams. They're the offenses. Like the defense isn't actually allowed to call them, just the offense. I wonder if Andrew Fisher called team meetings at Tennessee last year and just would say, hey guys, I know you all think you get timeouts, but actually they're all mine. I get to call all of them.
I'd be disappointed if he didn't have that team meeting. It's so good. All right, so Burkie, this episode we're going to call it the Tony V episode, and the reason we're doing that is because as we're recording, we don't know whether Tony Vitello is going to become the next manager of the San Francisco Giants or if he's going to stay with Tennessee. You don't need to comment on this unless you want to, but my gut is that he's staying. I don't know why I think that. I just have this gut feel that he's staying because I think if he's we're recording, don't mind saying this, we're recording Monday afternoon. I feel like if he was going to do it, he would have done it already.
Yeah,
but
I agree with that.
I think that what we want to do in this conversation is break Tony down as a candidate for the Giants. And I want to say this, Tony, if Major League Baseball, if you're listening, if you take Tony Vitello, this is a rental. You're not allowed to keep him. We get him back. He's too important to our sport. So just mind your manners, MLB. We don't mind the little rental. But I wrote this down, Burkie, what Tony has done. First of all, I would say that the 2022 Tennessee team that didn't even make it to Omaha, lost in that Super Notre Dame, I would argue that team did more to grow college baseball than any other singular team that I can think of. They were so compelling and so exciting and so unique and so modern. But, since the pandemic, Tony and Tennessee –
and insanely talented, by the way. They had the hardest pitcher on the planet, hardest throwing pitcher on the planet. They had Christian Moore, Blake Burke, Jordan Beck, Drew Gilbert, Trey Lipscomb in their lineup. All big leaguers. All big leaguers, except Blake Burke yet, but we know that's coming. And then from a pitching standpoint, they had Chase Dolander, Chase Burns, Drew Beam, and of course I already mentioned Ben Joyce, the hardest thrower on the planet. So it's got to be. I mean, it's got to be one of the most talented rosters, certainly on a very short list. And to your point, probably the most famous college baseball team ever. Certainly, again, people on the short list.
Yeah, people with no interest in college baseball were captivated by that team. And again, you're obviously your team at Tennessee went to Omaha. The 2005 team went to Omaha. In the 90s under Coach Delmonico with Todd Helton, those teams were top of the sport. But, Tony did inherit a dry spell from 2006 to 2017. The Vols didn't even make the bubble. And then Tony comes in, creates this incredible coaching staff, gets his feet underneath of them. The program starts to roll. And then what they've done since the pandemic is they're averaging 51.4 wins per year since the pandemic. 51.4. We play 56 in the regular season, just for anyone that wants to do that.
In the deepest conference in the history of the sport.
That's right. And 5 straight super regionals, which, I can speak from personal experience. Winning regionals is not easy. And so to go to 5 straight supers is outrageous in and of itself. So anyway, national title in there, the whole thing. So here's kind of the agenda, Burkie, because we're going to be like the Giants for a second. So first of all, we got to know.
We get to be Buster Posey?
We'll be Buster Posey.
Okay, I've always wanted to be Buster Posey. Awesome.
better run tool, both of these hosts than Buster, no offense, but every other thing.
He's got us on the rest. Yeah. I don't know what his play calling skills are like. So, but like as far as hitting and fielding and throwing, yes, he wins.
How many fantasy football championships have you won, Buster? I mean, come on.
Now we're getting into the good stuff.
That's right. So we're going to, first question we as Buster Posey have to answer is, why is Tony elite? Why is he so good at college baseball? And then we need to, and that list is fairly long. And then we need to answer which of those things parallel to, being the manager of the San Francisco Giants. The third question we got to answer is, like, what is he going to have to add? What is Tony going to have to add to his bag to succeed in this role if he takes it? And again, just another caveat. We don't know. As we're taping this, we do not know if he's taking this job or not taking this job. And then if we have time, Burkie, I'd love to cover like some of the best traits of managers that you had. People that I always think, like, as we have bosses in our life, no matter how well or poorly it goes, there's always at least one thing you can learn from every manager that you ever have. Mm-hmm. And that whether that's in sports or in life. So, all right. I'm going to list. You want me to just rattle off my list of why I think Tony's elite, or you want to go? Yeah.
Go for it.
Okay. So here's what I wrote down. Number one, his number one superpower is talent acquisition. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. He knows what the best players look like. He knows where to find them. And he is so compelling in recruiting that Tony V does not lose very many recruiting battles. That's my assumption there. So he is unbelievable at talent acquisition. Fair. That feels like that's pretty obvious, right?
Yeah. And there's a lot of layers to that, which you laid out. You got to recognize talent. You got to not just a type of talent, right? You got pitching talent, you got middle infield talent, you have power, you have, all those kinds of things. You got to recognize them. You got to build a relationship. You've got to secure a commitment. Then you've got to navigate the draft, right? And then get them on campus, keep them happy, develop them, and then put them in a position to succeed. And he's checked all those boxes fantastically over his period of time. And then, of course, in the modern era, you have, and I don't want to put the cart before the horse here, but you have very similar to major league free agency, which is a high dollar NIL portal player, which then that's a different type of recruiting. Some of that's not as hard to identify, right? Not that hard to identify Liam Doyle and Andrew Fisher, even though maybe some people, present company included, thought they were better than others.
Yeah, that's right.
But you do
tough receipt for Coach Rudy there.
Yes. But you do have to win the 2 or 3 or 4 other major players that are all probably spending in the same ballpark, right? I mean, I think generally speaking, you have to convince them that your place, your culture, your program is the best place for them to come for 1 year to get ready for the draft.
Yep. Amen. All that stuff is spot on. Second superpower, second real strength of Tony V for me is the staff he put together at Tennessee was like, so when I underestimated Liam Doyle and Andrew Fisher, just to put a bow on that. But I really underestimated Tony when he was hired by Tennessee. I kind of landed on this, and I think I was a little bit just discouraged because I thought Dave Serrano was a great hire. He'd take 2 different programs to Omaha, and it didn't go well. And I loved his staff. I love Larry Simcox. I love Eric Thomas. Like I was discouraged. I just felt like, man, like this seemed like it should have gone way better than it did. And but when Tony was hired, I remember thinking, well, he's such a good recruiter. I know he'll get good players. Like that's at least something, right? The thing I didn't know was Tony had this great staff in his back pocket. Like meaning like he knew what he wanted to do. Frank Anderson, boom. Josh Elander, amazing. Quentin Eberhard is your strength coach. Like, not only did Tony have the right guys picked out, but he had a very thorough, I thought, vision for what he wanted his staff to look like. And I think it's been a real difference maker.
Yeah, and I think just be fair. Call it what it is. I think there are a lot of people that have a perception of Tony Vitello and maybe what he's like. And the consistency with his staff would speak to, I think, a very different picture of what maybe the Vitello haters would assume, right? Because if you're, let's just say, unstable emotionally, you don't keep that kind of staff continuity with that quality of a person for as long as he has, right? So I think people mistake his fiery nature and his uber competitiveness for somehow a lack of stability maybe on a day-to-day basis. And I don't think that could be farther from the truth. I think what you see is what you get with Tony. And I think the fact that he's had so many great people stay so long under his leadership would speak to that.
Agreed. Yeah. Incredible. Yeah. I think it's very underrated in hiring two coaches. Like if I was an athletic director, I'm not trying to oversimplify this, and I know that they do this, but if I was an athletic director knowing what I know now, I would spend a lot of time on Coach Rooney, tell me who your staff is and why. And like, are we getting these guys or are we not getting these guys? Like, I feel like I see so many head coaches get hired and fail because the staff that they assemble is like, just doesn't feel like it's the right one. So anyway, I think a third thing, Burkie, I think Tony V's got the gift of managing stars. I think he's really good with that, like, alpha star player. And even like Tony is really close with Max Scherzer from Mizzou. They were teammates, or I think he coached them, or, like they're not far away from each other at Mizzou. He's got relationships with like Peyton Manning and Morgan Wallen. And I say that, like, obviously he's had star after star after star. You just rattle them off at Tennessee. Like, I don't think every coach is great at stars. I remember my dad always teasing me about, like, hey, you'll never be able to coach, like my dad's generation, our dad's generation, they tended to say things that like a sports psychologist would cringe at. Like, they put negative things. That's just how they were raised, I guess. But my dad would say lovingly, right? Like, he wasn't rooting against me, but he'd say, oh, you'll never be able to coach talent, because you don't get it. You weren't that way. And I'm like, like, he was really just trying to, like, get me riled up, right? But Tony, you could never say that about. Like, he's so comfortable with those massive persona alpha players. And I think that's a real talent.
Yeah. And I would say, I think you nailed that. And I think the flip side's also true. Tony was a walk-on. And if you look at Tony's program, and this is probably I think the most underappreciated part about his program is, I named all those superstar players. Let me name some other players that are absolute glue guys for the success that they've had. Evan Russell, Redmond Walsh, Kirby Connell, Xander Sechrest, Hunter Ensley. These are players that were not superstar players, and I'm sure I've missed a few. Ty Stark, not superstar players. Some of them walked on. And Tennessee baseball would not have the story that they've had under Tony without his, number one, his eye for walk-ons that potentially could help. But number two, his willingness to be like, that's not a major league star player, but that wins in college baseball. And so, again, I think another layer to Tony's character as a leader is he loves star players. And he's really good at coaching them, but he's not just lost in the stars. Like, he has a very complete roster and has won with players all across the spectrum of talent and prospect status.
Yep. Very fair. Very, very fair. Well, I'm going to go out of order here for a second. Media is an interesting part of this. I think Tony is really compelling in the media. And, like, the Tennessee fan base is so smitten with Tony. And, like, I think you could oversimplify and say, well, of course they are, because he's won so big. I think that's oversimplified. I think the Tennessee, you would know better than me, of course, but I think the Tennessee fan base loves Tony, of course, because he's won, but also because in the media, he's not Belichick. He's not boring. He's not coach speak. I think we could argue in a second that maybe in a big league setting, he'd have to kind of reel that in a little bit. But he's so charismatic, and he doesn't fight that in the media.
Yes, I agree with everything you just said, and I do think that would be one of the more fascinating things to follow if he were to take the Giants job, because I would label his post-game chats as like just stream of consciousness. And
yes,
in a market as big as San Francisco, with players as famous as the Giants have and will get, that might lead you down some pathways you maybe didn't mean to go down. So that would be fascinating.
But I would say though, like, and this is where, like there will be people in professional baseball who, I get it, will be very offended by this hire because Tony hasn't spent one day in professional baseball. And there are people that have spent 30 years in that world and would die for an opportunity like this. I would say, like, Tony has gotten a ton of media reps at Tennessee, right? Like, it's a highly, highly covered program. Like, this is, it's not like Tony might have to change his angle a little bit in the media, but it's not for lack of reps. I know in the big leagues every single day, but man, like, he's got a microphone in front of his face a lot at Tennessee.
No, there's no doubt. Yeah, they got plenty of beat writers, and there's plenty of outlets that, I mean, right now in the middle of football season, if you go to any Tennessee website, they're detailing Tennessee's fall scrimmages.
100%.
And that's wild to think about, even as recent, I should say, as 5 years ago. But I mean, to think that, they sell out fall games and they're getting year-round coverage from the most ardent Tennessee football websites just shows you the media following that program has built. And so, as you said, like the attention from the media would not be a new thing for him.
Yep. And getting back to your point, 2 points ago, I watched the Mike Keith show that he was on recently, and he was going through the fall and wasn't like, he doesn't duck questions. But he was talking about, he was getting back to your point about walk-ons. He said, like, hey, he actually said, I felt like last year's team was top heavy. Like, we had stars, but we didn't have the right pieces behind those stars. So, like, very cognizant of, this is not fantasy football. Like, you got to have a team that works together. I think another thing, we talked about this on a previous podcast, but someone like Tony, who's coached in 5 straight super regionals, in Omaha, 4 national title, in the SEC, and as the head coach of the most, fill in your adjective, program in the league, right? Like, there's no one's like, oh, we're playing Tennessee this weekend. Like, it's circled, right? Like, it's the controversial, whatever word you want to use. It doesn't really matter. But Tony, the point of it is, Tony has coached in a lot of high stress scenarios. Like, this guy I don't think he's going to get sped up in scenarios. Like, he's coached under great duress a lot.
And I actually think just from his own level, it would in some regards be the opposite. I think he's so used to SEC baseball games where they're at home and it's this huge event, or they're on the road and they get a lot of razz and a lot of razzing and a lot of packed stadiums. And there's just the urgency and intensity of the SEC slate and just kind of the persona that he and that program has, that I think there would be a lot of snoozers in Major League Baseball relative to what he's used to, honestly.
Yeah, fair. Yep, I think it's fair. Final superpower strength that I want to call out is I can't like make a list for you, but you can't be as good as Tony is at talent acquisition without having really good feel and relationships with agents. Agents are such a big part of college sports and college baseball now. And I think that if you're a head college baseball coach or even a coach in professional baseball, if you don't have great relationships with agents, I don't know how you would survive, or at least not the ability to work with those people because they are so prevalent now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's
a great point. Yes. Great point. Okay. And now I'm going to transition us into the paralleled strengths. Okay. Because I think this is probably the place to start. The number one thing people say, do you think he'd be good at it? I always say, well, of course I think he'd be good at it. He's been good at every job he's had basically to this point. But we all know in pro sports, the premier quality of every great team is great players. So you just can't overcome it.
Mm-hmm.
And in college baseball, he gets to, for the most part, pick his players. Major League Baseball, for the most part, you don't. However, if the Giants have made him a commitment, which the Giants have always been a player in free agency, they just haven't landed many of them recently. But if they have made him the commitment, which I'm sure has been a big part of his conversation, that they are going to spend, let's just say with their nearest foes, which puts them at the top of the sport, the Dodgers and the Padres. If they have made him that commitment, I do think, because I said this on our boy Coach Farron's radio show today, there is a fair amount of recruiting that goes on the free agent side of things in professional sports, specifically Major League Baseball. And if you're in the ballpark, from a financial standpoint, there are things that the managers can do to sway players to come play for them. Like that is, I'm not saying it's the only part of the equation, but it is part of the equation. Who am I going to play for? Do I like this guy?
Yeah.
Do I like the way he's going to set the culture of our clubhouse? Do I like the way he's going to handle all the different things that the manager sets the tone for, right? Off days and travel schedules and travel attire and all those types of things, right? Tony's ability to connect with people, agents, players, and potentially win some of those. I do think what we've seen in the modern portal NIL era, him win his fair share of those, I do think is a potential feather in his cap. And if you're Buster Posey, I would say that part of why you're hiring him would be because of that. Because again, I think we all agree the Giants seem to be willing to go there with some of these big time free agents. And they just haven't landed many of them. They got Willie Adames the last time around, but they just haven't gotten a lot of them. And I don't know why. But maybe Buster thinks Tony could be a leg up on some of those big-time free agent recruiting pitches.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I hadn't thought about that for a hot second, but I think that's a great point. Because, right, like how often are the Giants getting outbid? It feels like never. It feels like they've got more money to spend than anybody.
They took Devers'
they can't
contract.
Get anyone to take it.
They took Devers' contract. They clearly are okay with spending. But there's only so many fish you're going to try to catch. And if they say no, like, you're back to player development in the draft, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. What about staff development? And I guess this could be negotiated in a contract, Burkie, but like how much autonomy will someone like Tony have in putting his big league staff together, in your opinion?
Again, I'm sure these are things that Tony has worked through or is working through. Again, we're talking as this thing is still up in the air, but my guess is that would be way more collaborative than it was. John Curry asked him who his staff is. I know John Curry. I don't think John Curry had specific people in mind when he asked Tony's staff. Now, he might have inquired about experience and why Tony thought those people were good fits. But I think once Tony convinced him of that, I'm sure he was like, cool, that sounds great. Let's do that, right? Whereas my guess is because it feels like Buster Posey and him have struck up such a great relationship, and because Buster Posey has been in Major League Baseball for, let's just call it 20 years, and Tony would be new to it. I would think, but I do think Tony does have quite a few friends in professional baseball, and his buddy that was the manager of the Padres, that I'm drawing a blank on his name right now.
Jace Tingler?
Yeah, Jace Tingler. Like he's got plenty of connections and relationships in pro baseball, but my guess is Buster Posey would speak into that somewhat. Don't you think?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think collaborative is a great word choice there. I think that's exactly where it would land. So, all right, so let's do let's do what would Tony need to add? I think one thing is the media would just be like, he'd have to be very thoughtful around like how much of this, how does he balance, like he wants to remain charismatic in the media without, like you're going to be interviewed every single day, like how to manage that. I think that would probably be collaborative too. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that's interesting, and this is where Willy Adames becomes a really important player in this. What I've heard about Willy Adames is that he is absolutely the right person. Like he's I wouldn't call him like a star, but he's definitely getting star money.
Yeah.
But I've heard he's an unbelievable clubhouse guy because his work ethic is like, you could argue that he works too hard at the game, that he should like go less reps and preserve himself. But like, I think Tony and Willy Adames could make a great pairing as far as like creating the right culture for them. But I do think one of his secret sauces at Tennessee is the roster is so deep and talented that you and I have talked about this many times. It polices everything. Because if you start to like waver at Tennessee, there's a really good player dying for your at-bats or your innings. And I don't know that can be replicated in the big leagues.
No, maybe it can't. No, like Rafael Devers is playing.
Right.
He's playing. And so,
yes.
Yeah, those kinds of things, again, I think I keep using Rick Pitino because it just feels like it's a very similar comparison. Like, even though I do think Tony's leadership style is different than Rick Pitino's, their star status amongst their program and amongst their sport is very similar. And so to go into a locker room where you're not the highest paid person and you're not the biggest star is unique. Now, again, I think Tony's got the emotional awareness to pull that off, but it is different. It just is,
Yeah.
And so those would all be challenges. Not saying he couldn't overcome them, but those would be challenges to what he would be walking into that he hasn't faced as a head coach in college.
Yeah. The other thing, Burkie, that I'd say, like, what else will he need? I don't know how to phrase it, but like Tony coaches very, like, typically with a very emotional, fiery style. I would imagine like 162 games would maybe like require him to change that a little bit or adjust it, or what do you think about that?
I think it would be very interesting, his passion and urgency and intensity over 162. I think that would be very, again, I kind of talked about it a little bit ago. Like, they're just, what do we love about college baseball is that once that conference slate starts, you get a 15 to 20 game runway to kind of just figure out what you think about your team, because you're still learning, and then you're essentially playing Major League Baseball playoff games from an intensity standpoint for the next 2 months, from the middle of March to the middle of May. You play, let's just talk the SEC because that's where he's coming from. You play 30 straight playoff games. And you got some midweek games in the middle there that you can call those whatever you want to call them. But on the weekend, they're all playoff games. That's what they are. And that's just not what May, June, and July baseball games are. That's just not.
Yep.
And so that part, I think, would be a big adjustment for him. Not like hard to on the actual coaching side of it. Just, I think emotionally, for his temperament, I think his temperament fits way better with that side of it, the college side of it.
Yeah, for sure. Anything we're missing there, Burkie, that you think Tony would have to add or adjust?
I mean, there's a million things. I mean, Murph could probably tell us 1,000 things that he didn't even think about on the front end. But I just think in general, I said this on Farron's show, like I do think Tony, if you follow that program closely, he is intensely loyal to his players to the point of, once the fan base got like fully engaged in that program, they started offering their opinions of players, and that's the good and the bad of it. And this last season specifically, when Dean Curley was really struggling defensively, he could have, I think, acquiesce to the fan base in some regards and just DH Dean Curley there for a period of time, and he just didn't do it. Like, he was so loyal to Dean Curley, he would not do it. And I think that character trait will actually serve him very well in a big league clubhouse. And as a matter of fact, you need that because, we all know if you lose the clubhouse, you're dead. And I think he faults to the players, and that would serve him well.
Yep. I shared with you a friend who works in MLB sent me a text that just said, it basically said that this Tony V thing is so great for the sport. I hope he takes it. And now I disagree with the second part. Like, I don't want Tony to take this because I selfishly want to keep him in college baseball. But I think it is, I agree with the first half of the sentiment. Like, it is great. Like, what great conversations this whole scenario has stirred up. And again, like, I'm really trying to make this a life commitment for Coach Rooney to not underestimate Tony Vitello again. Like, I did it once. I need to not do it again.
Well, it's pretty insane that a person at the status that you told me who shared that would say that about any college head coach, even though you and I both know there's any number of 10 to 12, maybe 15 college head coaches that I think would be fantastic at being big league managers. I don't think Tony's the only one gifted enough to do it. I think there are other ones for sure. But Tony has positioned himself to be famous enough, let's just call it what it is, that somebody in Major League Baseball that would say that, kind of wild, really.
Yep. Yeah. It's interesting, like the when you just brought up like other coaches, like when I think about Murph, like obviously he spent a decade kind of in an apprenticeship role for this, but like one of his two gifts is like he can run the room. Like, Murph's not going to walk, and Tony I think is this way too. Murph's not going to walk in a big league clubhouse and feel like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed by these big personalities, right? Like he's and that's a gift, right? That others have, and then like, I just think the college head coach is not, they're wired to not get sped up in a game. Like they like you just said, every season they spend a minimum of 2 months, 10 weeks, really more than 2 months, coaching in those breakneck high pressure games. Like that's a real gift that they bring.
Yeah. And then they go to the actual postseason. Right. And then they do that. And so, I also think, and I think we can finish here, I think the neat thing about, just get back to our love fest for college baseball, I think the neat thing about the current state of college baseball as a whole is, I think the gap between college baseball and the major leagues has never been smaller in a few different ways, one of which is recognition. And so much so that I don't think Buster Posey would have to spend a lot of time educating his roster on who Tony is. Yeah. I don't know if there's ever, no, I'm certain that would be a new thing. Post COVID, I feel like the line between the big leagues and college baseball has been blurred enough to where most of your roster would immediately know who Tony is. And that is a new era of college baseball that, again, we could point to a lot of different reasons why, but it just is true. I believe it to be true.
100%. Yep. That's well said. All right. Let's cap it there, Burkie. Yep. Again, Major League Baseball, if you're listening, this is a rental. You're not buying Tony V. You can have him for 5 years or less, and then he needs to be returned to us. But again, we're going to be team players here, and if you have to have them, you have to have them. And boy, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
All right, we might have to do a addendum to this, but we'll see how it plays out. Good stuff, Roons.
That's right. It's only because we love you, Buster Posey. That's it. Thank you, people, for listening, and we will catch you next time on the D1 Daily Podcast.